It's January 7th, 2021. This is a special edition of Roqe, Flight PS752. We will not forget.
Now it's the anniversary and we're all together again. And my parents, like when I see my father, my mother, their eyes are always wet, tear in their eyes.
I just said, please tell me it's not Ukrainian Airlines.
No justice would be real justice in this scenario. Real justice would be for them to come back.
We all look 10 years older comparing to the picture that was this day last year.
If I were the pilot of that airplane, if I knew that there's a high alert in the airspace, I wouldn't fly the airplane.
Actually, the only outrageous fact we know is that these people, whoever they are, their maximum penalty is supposed to be 3 years in jail. 3 years for murdering 176 people.
This was not an air disaster, for one thing. This was not a plane malfunctioning. This was a very specific criminal act by a criminal regime with a history of criminality.
I'm not sure if I'm going to be happy again.
Well, hi there. Those are some of the voices and moments you will be hearing on this special edition of Roqe. Welcome to episode number 74 of our program. I'm Jian Ghomeshi, and we are on an ongoing mission to build an audiovisual encyclopedia of Iranian diaspora identity. Salam dostan aziz, umeedvarem khub bashin. We're coming to you on our platforms SoundCloud, Spotify, Instagram, Telegram, iTunes, and YouTube. This will be a somber and serious episode, but really also necessary in our eyes. That is, despite all the madness going on in parts of the world this week, we felt we needed to devote an entire episode, this one, to the horrific events of exactly 1 year ago, and all the innocent lives that were so tragically lost. Look, if you're a member of our Roqe audience or have even just happened upon this show recently, it's unlikely that you don't already know the harrowing and devastating story of Flight PS752. For many of us in the Iranian diaspora, this was the ultimate in nightmarish news, even on the heels of all the outrages that Iranians have had to confront in the last 4 decades, the implications of a repressive theocracy in the country of our ancestry, years of atrocities and executions, more recently a brutal crackdown on protests in November 2019, and add to that a general misunderstanding and global misconception full of stereotypes of who Iranians are. This event surely was enough to push many of us over the edge. But even more specifically, for those in the Iranian-Canadian community, where a disproportionate number of the victims of this tragedy, this crime came from, this was even more personal. The victims were people we knew, people we were in touch with, people we lived with, loved, and lauded. They were our hamvatan. And every member of the Roqe team has one tie or another to dear folks we lost on that plane at the hands of the IRGC. The events of this moment 1 year ago would lead to weeks of mournful gatherings in our community, the final times we would assemble in a pre-COVID period, sharing tears, heartache, frustration, and no shortage of anger at how this happened. In fact, the impetus for launching this program was underscored by our feelings after this tragedy and our desire to create some kind of platform in English to share stories, ideas, and impressions of Iranians that are not just steeped in traditional stereotypes, and to create a discourse around identity and who we are in our global community. On our first episode of Roqe in April of 2020, we dedicated the program to the victims of Flight PS752 and their families. Today, we hope to continue that dedication and that promise to not let the memory of this sad event and these innocent lives lost ever be too far from our memory. Over the next couple of hours, we've invited some guests from around the world to share their experiences, their emotions, and their stories with respect to PS752. Arash Morattab, who lost his brother and sister-in-law, Arvin and Aida, will join us from Canada. Anna Rajskaya, who has covered the story from the beginning, will join us from Ukraine. Navaz Ebrahim, who lost her dear sister and brother-in-law, Nilufar and Saeed, will be on the line from Dallas, Texas. Kaveh Shahrooz, who is a human rights campaigner and lawyer, will join us from Toronto. Nima Neyestani, who lost his partner, Shadi, will be with us from Canada, as well as Amir Kasravi, who has dedicated his life to aviation and flight safety. And Saghar Nourian Ashkan Davoudpour, who lost their sister Ghazal, will join us from Washington, D.C. We hope that you will stick with us to hear these voices and keep these memories alive, as well as to pay tribute to all 176 victims and their families. And now, a Roqe Special Edition, Flight PS752. We will not forget. First guest on this Roqe Special Edition is a Kurdish-Iranian software engineer living in Canada. Arash Morattab received his master's degree in cloud computing from ETS University in Montreal. He works as a solutions architect and helps different organizations to build and modernize their IT infrastructure. Arash lost his brother Arvin and sister-in-law Aida Farzaneh on PS752, and since that time, Arash has been actively engaged in the search for justice around this horrific event. He is one of the co-founders of the Association of Families of Flight PS752 Victims, and he's a member of the board of directors of that association. And Arash Morattab joins us from Toronto today. Hello, sir.
Hello. Hi, Jian.
Arash, first of all, condolences once again to you and your family. I can only imagine it has been a very difficult year, and this anniversary is making it all very real again. You lost your brother and your sister-in-law. Tell us, if you can, what's in your thoughts, what you are feeling 1 year later.
I feel like it's still the first day. Nothing has changed. All the questions are not answered. We're still at the same. It's like with every news, they keep killing them. And we're the anniversary, but it seems so fresh. We still feel the pain as the first day. And also disappointment from the international community, which failed so far. And let's see how it's gonna go after this 1 year.
What have the last few months, I'm going to ask you specifically about what you think needs to be done, what kind of responsibility you think needs to be taken, and what you see as justice. But just reflect a little bit more on what this has been like for you and your family over the last 12 months, how you've been living with this.
Since those first days, first it was a shock for all of us. I was almost read the news. I was following real time while it was happening. I was seeing his flight on flight radar when he was flying. So everything for me is so surreal since the beginning. And all these days, we just all the families, we got together, we made this association, we keep meeting each other, we keep fighting, and we are all engaged. Half of our brain is dealing with this case, with what happened to our beloved ones. And now it's the anniversary, and we're all together again. And my parents, when I see my father, my mother, their eyes are always wet, tear in their eyes. And it makes me really keep going harder and harder, and myself too. Like it's like crazy. It's so surrealistic world we're living in these days.
I know both Arvin and Ida were young and highly accomplished. They both had PhDs. What can you tell us a little bit about them personally?
They were like trying hard for their life. They were all studying, and everything was just ready. Like they were at the top point in their life to just start having fun and enjoy more and get benefits of what they tried hard for, like buy a house or travel different places, having a baby, and they just went for this vacation. They're always happy couple, always enjoying each other, and always smiling, good energy, and everybody remembers them. And they're always like planning all those like fun activities, like camping, going, gathering with friends, and they'll be always remembered.
Yes.
And when we do any kind of gathering, like in my family, we always think about them. Even they're twins with my other brother, his Armin, but they're really like have their own characters.
Arash, we still do not have empirical evidence of exactly what happened on that night 1 year ago, other than acknowledgement that the Iranian military, the IRGC, shot down the plane. We know that. There are many who do not believe this was human error, as the Islamic Republic claims. What are your feelings on this?
I think if we do math, like possibility of all these things being like not on purpose is like goes almost to zero. To not do such a thing like on purpose. Like first thing, like why didn't you shoot down the Iranian, like the airspace before attacking there? That's like 10%. If you do like more, why did you shoot the 2 missiles to the plane? That's like lowers the possibility of not being on purpose, like being on purpose. And if you just go deeper and deeper and multiply all these together, doing this, like shooting down this plane, it's like 100% on purpose. If you do math and all calculate this thing, and all their behavior, all what they had so far, like the way they're behaving and not answering anything, and I think COVID helped them a lot too here. Because they could run about everything, like even the Aban 98, Aban and Abadahash happened. They killed 1,500 people in the street. Yes. They could run with it because of COVID, and they could like increase the statistics for a number of people killed in Iran, and close down the streets due to COVID, and people can't make like protests or anything. Same thing happened for PS752. They could just prevent sending with black boxes, delaying it, making fun of all this international laws. And to me, it's like completely on purpose to prevent a war with U.S.
Well, it's not just that the Islamic Republic of Iran is not taking responsibility in many people's eyes. It's that we've also heard many stories at this point about how the families of the victims of Flight 752 have faced intimidation and harassment and threats from Tehran and its agents. Do you know about this? Have you or any of your family members been subject to this kind of harassment?
Yeah, they try to call them like martyrs, like they died for their ideology. We can call them martyrs in the other words, but it's different than the way they call it. They don't have the right to call it that way. The killers can't call it that way. Maybe we can call it if we want, but they can't. And it's their behavior. It's really psychologically, it's really dangerous for the victims and the families of the victims. Like the guy who came to the TV, Amir Hajizadeh, and he accepted the full responsibility. He comes back to the TV every week almost and laughs and goes and launches, shows his missiles. Like every missile I see, I think about the 2 missiles they shoot at the plane. Like I see his face. I see that night that he said I accepted the full responsibility, and now he's laughing the next day, and is showing his own other facilities. He gets involved in the car industry, like a machine industry. He gets involved in many different things. Like nobody resigned, and everybody's keep seeing these guys, and this is mind-blowing.
Has anyone contacted you specifically, or any of the association members from the IRGC or from Tehran or any sort of agent to say, stop this, you shouldn't be demonstrating, you shouldn't be creating any more public awareness or anything?
No, not to me personally.
When you talk about seeking justice, and we hear that a lot, what exactly do we mean at this point by justice? What would you consider justice for the downing of Flight 752, and what would give you or family members some kind of closure?
I think the most realistic thing I see, like the families I feel about them, about having justice, is see those who did this thing, who they shoot the missiles and give the command and all those chains, and after everything is clear, those need to suffer same as the families what they went through. They have to be they should be a payback. It's not about money. It's about nothing can replace this thing, and they have to I think everybody's like thinking, when they want to calm themselves down, they think about them suffering and getting like going to the court and get like intimidated, get like suffer and pain, like what all the families went through. That makes them feel a little better, I think. And it's not like you can't go back in time and bring them back. And so what about all this 1 year we've been through?
Do you feel like
that's all I can say.
Do you feel like we're any closer to getting that justice?
We have a long way, because they're still coming and laughing in the TV and still doing their own stuff, and they are doing like not answering to anything. But I think after what happened to us, we had two choices: to just be quiet and do nothing, or do something about it and fight for it. And this way we are fighting. It's like I don't have a regret, but my life has changed, and all these families is the same, and we're all together in this.
A final question to you: if Arvin were here today, what would you want to say to him?
I want to say I love you, Arvin. I really miss you. We're always thinking about you.
Arash Morattab, I know these interviews will never get easier talking about this. I really appreciate what you're doing with the association. We really thank you for speaking out and for coming on our program.
Thanks, Jian.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
چرا رفتی چرا من بیقرارم به سر سودای آغوش تو دارم نگفتی ماهتاب امشب چه زیباست ندیدی جانم از غم ناشکیباست چرا رفتی چرا من بیقرارم به سر سودای آغوش تو دارم
This is a Roqe Special Edition Flight PS752. We will not forget. We're coming to you on our platforms SoundCloud, Spotify, Instagram, Telegram, iTunes, and YouTube. And we invite you to subscribe if you like what you're hearing and want to learn more about our content. We also invite you to visit the website ps752justice.com, ps752justice.com, that the families of the victims have set up for the latest information, schedules of commemorations, and ideas about how you can help. We've also linked to that website from ours, roqemedia.com. Our next guest is a freelance reporter who has contributed to Radio Farda for 12 years, mostly reporting on major news in the countries of the former Soviet Union, as well as stories related to Russia and Iran. Since the downing of Flight PS752, Anna Rajskaya has reported on every aspect of its investigations and negotiations. Anna's knowledge of Ukrainian and Persian has helped her to closely follow the developments around this tragedy, both in Ukraine and Iran. And right now, Anna Rajskaya joins me from Kiev, Ukraine. Hello, Anna.
Hello.
Thank you very much for doing this today.
Thank you for having me, and I'd like to thank you for not letting this tragedy to be forgotten. And I'd like to take the opportunity to send my condolences to all the affected families.
Well, thanks for saying that. And you know, that dovetails into my first question for you, which is that you have been very connected to this story and have covered it closely over the last year. I'm thinking it's quite impossible to not get emotional reliving the stories of so many innocent lives lost. What has this year been like for you?
Well, I remember quite clearly the first hour when I heard this news on the media. It was a shock. Then it was a lot of hard work for the first few days. And then there was this ceremony when the body arrived and meeting all those families, seeing their grief. It was maybe a little too much. Quite unbearable, actually. And I thought that after all this work and after all this time, I would develop some kind of immunity. So far, this hasn't happened, actually. Yesterday, I was at the screening of the Ukrainian documentary about the plane, and I was sitting next to Denis Likhnov's father. Denis was a flight attendant, and he died when he was 26. And his father cried through all the movie, and he was filmed on his son's grave, and he said this very strange words. I mean, we usually hear this the other way around. He said he always wanted to be like his son, and maybe that's why this tragedy was very hard to him. I know the stories of actually many other families, not only in Ukraine, also in Canada, in other countries, mainly through Twitter. And my colleague lost his cousin in this terrible crash. Well, maybe I just end at a little positive note. I also met many people and became friends with many people because of this tragedy. So I guess people are brought together not only by something good, but also by something very, very bad.
You know, we've dealt with this in Canada, which you know had a disproportionate number of the lives lost in this incident, and those of us in the Iranian Canadian community felt it very deeply and knew so many of the folks who were on this flight. And obviously it was a huge story in Iran. We know little or less about how this affected Ukraine, despite the fact that there were many Ukrainians also on that flight, and the flight itself was a Ukrainian airliner and a Ukrainian pilot. How was the story dealt with, or how have the Ukrainian people consumed this story?
Iran has always been a very distant place for an ordinary Ukrainian. And before this tragedy, I would say people had little to no knowledge about Iran. Now they think of Iran as an awful place, as a place that we actually got connected in the wrong way. Unfortunately, the way the Iranian authorities dealt with this tragedy, it contributed to the grief, it contributed to the disappointment, and we all sincerely hope that we'll get some closure, we'll get some truthful answers from the Iranian authorities, and we can actually move forward, maybe find another footing to develop our relations when we have the closure.
You know, I said that you've been someone who's been following this this tragedy very closely in Ukraine and in Iran. So let me ask you to, 1 year removed from the actual horrific event, take us through what we've learned. I mean, first take us back to this time last year. Despite all the kinds of tensions in the region, specifically after the American killing of Soleimani and the Iranian military response, Iran did not close the sky to civilian flights on that night of, I guess it was on the morning of January 8th, 2020, Iran time. Why was the civilian airspace not closed?
I believe you have to ask Iran's president or the head of the IRGC or Ayatollah Khamenei. I even don't know who is in charge of closing the airspace in Iran. I can tell you about Ukraine because many ask why Ukraine didn't cancel its flights to Iran. Actually, several days ago, and I tweeted this story, Ukrainian president's former advisor basically accused Secretary of Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council of failing to save this flight. And he alleged, I say alleged because he didn't give any proof, that on the 7th of January last year, he received from what he says was a trusted source this information about upcoming military actions in Iran and this NOTAM to American airlines to avoid Iran and Iraq's airspace. This may be true because we know Iran warned Iraq and through Iraq other countries of its upcoming missile attack at the US bases. Well, in Ukraine, this person is called Igor Novikov. He says he didn't want to, it was a late hour and he didn't want to wake up everyone. So he just made sure that the secretary of the National Security Council saw his messages and that's it. And well, there wasn't no official confirmations or other comments to this story. And many think this accusation may only be someone's political play against Alexei Danilov, but it actually raises many questions. We don't know exactly why, for example, Ukrainian President Zelensky was on a trip to Amman in those days. My colleagues at the Kyiv Bureau or Radio Liberty, they broke the story about this very mysterious meeting that our president had with Russia's National Security and Defense Council Secretary Nikolai Patrushev. And actually, after this crash happened, it took our president almost 19 hours to get back to Ukraine, which is weird. Of course, I'm not saying that these stories have any connection, but well, they happened at the same time, almost at the same place. And both sides refused to comment. Of course, Russians keep denying Putin's meetings with Qasem Soleimani, while Iranian propaganda recently trumpets quite a lot about them. But getting back to facts, I mean, this may be some rumors, but getting back to facts, the Ukrainian International Airlines says, the owner of the plane says there were no NOTAMs, so they had no reason to cancel the flights. And this airline is in a very difficult financial situation, has been for years. So under the normal circumstances, canceling flights without a major reason would have subjected them to very heavy fines. And they say the decision had to have been made by Iran. Why no such decision was made? Or was the airspace deliberately kept open? I don't know.
I know you've spoken to the wife of the pilot of Ukrainian airline PS752, that fateful flight. Has she told you anything about what he might have communicated to her? Did he have any trepidation about flying that day?
Yes, actually, as I said, that I made friends with many people. Katerina Gaponenko, the pilot's widow, was one of them. And we talked a lot, and not only through work, but through our personal contacts. She told me and my colleagues during the last interview that her husband was very irritated, even angry. She thought this was kind of personal. She got angry with him. They didn't have a proper goodbye. But now she thinks he was only worried, but he was a man of duty, and he couldn't refuse not just to go to work. He had to go on the slide, and well, he did it.
Yes. And he, of course, lost his life as well. The question of whether this was an intentional shooting has been at the heart of assessing this tragedy. A recent report by Ralph Goodale, he's the special advisor to Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, undercuts Iran's claims of human and technical error. I mean, this is a question I'm asking everybody on this special just to see where they're at on this. But what do you think? In your opinion, was this horrific event simply a human error, as the Islamic Republic of Iran has claimed?
Well, obviously, I don't know the exact answer, but Iran wants us to believe this tragedy happened because of a human error. Well, I would say maybe or maybe not. When did Iran tell us that this plane was mistakenly brought down? On Saturday, January the 11th, and it was the first day after they decided to admit this wasn't a technical failure after all. But how did they understand this was a human error? Have they completed their investigation by the early morning of the fourth day? If so, why they denied the shutdown during the first 3 days? Or why it took them 1 year to deliver the final draft of their technical report? Right. Iran expects we take their words at face value, mainly because this isn't the first time a civilian airplane was mistakenly shot down by the military, but this isn't the first time a civilian airplane was shot down by the military deliberately either. So which is it? Iran has to provide evidence to its claim. Actually, it's relatively easy because maybe not so many people know that in the same way an airplane has black boxes to record all the technical information and the crew's communications, the Tor missile system has its own black boxes, which can be deciphered and give us the information about whether this system was misaligned, whether it mistook the civilian plane for a military target.
I never realized that missiles have black boxes. That's interesting.
Yes, and that's why I thought maybe this is important to mention. This black box will give us all the answers. If Iran, I don't know, for some reason refuses to give them to Ukraine, the same way they chose France to decipher the black boxes of the plane, they can choose an independent international investigator. By refusing to do this, Iran implicates itself. Or are they afraid we will know for sure that it was not a human error? I mean, this isn't the matter of my opinion or someone else's opinion. We can deal with facts and hard evidence. And the only reason we have to speculate is because Iran refuses to cooperate, despite all their assurances of being transparent.
Well, speaking of that, as a party to the Convention on International Civil Aviation, the Islamic Republic of Iran is required to investigate and prosecute all offenders and their accomplices. So far, they've not seemed to have done that at all. Rather, they've sought to ensure that the most senior officials involved avoid accountability. What can you tell us about the latest on a legal case internationally and the investigation in Ukraine and Iran?
Well, this case, it has several tracks. And first of all, it's technical investigation, and then comes criminal investigation. And there are so many speculations, but the facts are very few. Basically, the only thing we know for sure is that this plane went down as a result of an unlawful interference. I use this term specifically because it usually raises many questions. It means that the reason for this plane crash is something other than a technical failure or pilot's error. And we know this for sure from the deciphered flight recorders. This is one fact. Another fact is that this external object was a missile, and we know this from multiple videos and also from the damage on the plane parts caused by an anti-aircraft missile. Some of the evidence of this damage was documented by Ukrainian forensics team, who, despite Iran's very strenuous efforts to destroy this kind of evidence, managed to find several of shrapnel hit parts at the crash site. Well, we know that for at least 19 minutes after the missile hit, the pilot and the co-pilot were trying to navigate this plane, and the instructor kept giving them orders, just as the manual says. Actually, it's quite amazing. And this is all. This is it. This is all we know for a fact. There are also some plausible suppositions, like there were 2 missiles, and Iran said this in one of their preliminary reports, and also again we can see more than 1 missile in the videos. Iran told us the missiles were shot by a Tor system, but even this we don't know for a fact, because they didn't let the forensic team to collect any samples. They quite recently, on the New Year's Eve, sent Ukraine, the USA, and France, and these are the only countries which participate in the technical investigation. Iran didn't let Canada to join this team. So Iran sent the draft of its final technical report. We don't know what it says yet. The earliest date for it to be published is, I guess, April. And I don't think there will be any leaks before that, because this will be the violation of the conventions, and in all likelihood, Iran will try to justify by this its own transgressions and violations of the conventions. And this is only about technical investigation. The criminal investigation, I mean, we don't know even a single fact. We heard that 6 persons have been arrested, but Iran refused to specify who these people are, what role they played in the downing. And Ukrainian prosecutors say they have doubts such people even exist. During the talks in Tehran a couple of months back, a team of Ukrainian prosecutors were invited to the prosecutor's office in charge of this crime, but they said it was a photo op. They were shown file boxes, some files, all of them in Persian. Iranians promised to send some of this to Kyiv, and they didn't do it. And actually, the only outrageous fact we know is that these people, whoever they are, their maximum penalty is supposed to be 3 years in jail. 3 years for murdering 176 people.
Right. I mean, in a nutshell, then, what do you believe the Canadian and Ukrainian governments can do to not allow the IRGC to escape with impunity for PS752?
I believe Iran has only one choice: to tell the truth. They may buy time, make excuses, but this won't end well. I believe if they had told the truth on the very first day, whatever this is, they knew the truth on the very first day, it would have been so much better for anyone, definitely for the families, but also for Iran, for Islamic Republic of Iran too. Because if these negotiations will meet the dead end, the countries will go to court. And actually, Iran, by taking the United States to the international arbitration after the US shot down the Iranian plane in the late 80s, it showed the way. So they know how this works, and it won't go well for them. Frankly, I don't understand what is their motivations and how they actually see the way out of the situation. Ukraine has lots of legal experience seeking international arbitration. I'm sure Iran knows this. And I'm sure that at least at this point, Ukraine is very determined, and so is Canada, to seek justice, to help the families find answers. And the sooner Iran provides these answers, the better for all.
Yeah, it's a matter of whether that it happens at all, though. I mean, as I say, there's the intentions sound good, and the statements made by the government sound good. But speaking to the families of victims today on this program, I'm sure you go through this all the time. They're still searching for answers. They're still searching for some sense of justice, some sense of accountability around, these innocent civilians being murdered. Iran has announced, as you know, recently the allocation of $150,000 in compensation to each of the families of the 176 victims of 752. Canadian and Ukrainian officials say the amount should be negotiated. The Ukrainian Deputy Foreign Minister, as you know, has stressed that Kiev had not entered into substantive dialogue with Iran on compensation. What do you think of this announcement and this compensation from Iran?
Well, compensation, or perhaps reparation is the better word. It's the only way for a guilty party to make amends. So disregarding the ways this case goes forward, it will end in financial reparations to the family. But it's the end, not the beginning. Iran has always been willing to pay, but not to tell the truth. And quite frankly, how can we put a price on something? I don't mean this particular case. A price for any commodity, if you don't know what this is. In April last year, I broke out this story for Radio Farda that in March, Iran sent Ukraine a memorandum of understanding by signing which Ukraine agreed to accept the human errors in explanation in exchange for money from Iran. Like, it was plain and simple. Get our money, close the case. And the people who leaked this story in Ukraine and abroad believed this is simply wrong. And now this 150,000 that Iranian officials insist upon is just like another ridiculous attempt to buy off, to bribe. I don't know Iran's real motivations. I don't mean $150,000 is ridiculous. For Iran in its dire economic conditions, this may be a lot. And so for the family, maybe for families, I mean, it's not an amount for me to decide. What I mean is suggesting the money now, is offering the money now, is putting the cart before the horse. And I totally understand that it angers the families and it irritates enormously the Ukrainian officials and their partners.
Anna, there's so much to talk about, and you've been at the center of bringing a lot of these stories into the public space, and I really appreciate that. It's before I let you go, I mean, it's clear the families of the victims and outraged people all over the world are not going to stop seeking some kind of justice, as you know. Where do you think this story goes next?
Well, if the negotiations doesn't deliver any positive result, it will only end in court. Of course, when the country takes legal action against another country, it's usually some kind of international arbitrations. I know the families want those responsible for this shutdown to be tried in the International Criminal Court in The Hague. But, well, this court can only prosecute crimes committed within member states or referred to the court by the United Nations Security Council. As far as I know, Iran hasn't ratified the Rome Statute making it a member state, and no doubt Russia, which is itself to blame for the shutdown of the Malaysian airplane MH17 and which hasn't accepted the responsibility, will defend Iran at the Security Council. So with all these hurdles, this process is long. But as I said, Iran showed Ukraine the way how to institute these legal proceedings in court. And Ukraine is ready to negotiate with Iran, but patience has limits. That's why the Ukrainian negotiators have always said they will use all tools at their disposal to have Iran accountable. I didn't forget you asked repeatedly about about Canadian position, but Ukraine represents Canada in talks with Iran. And as far as I understand, this isn't going to change, despite Iran's very sharp criticism of Canada or ultimatums to Ukraine in this regard.
Anna Rajskaya, I very much appreciate your time and your perspective today. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
بستم بی خبر مبار سفر با درد و حسرت از شهر خودم راهی شدم و رفتم به غربت ای تازه گلم ترک تو کنم با چشم خون بار گلابتونم گلابتونم خدا نگهدار.
You are listening to a Roqe Special Edition, Flight PS752, We Will Not Forget. I'm Jian Ghomeshi. You can find the hub of all things Roqe, our website, at roqemedia.com, where we have also linked to ps752justice.com. We invite you to check that out. Our next guest is another person who lost a dear family member on Flight 752. Navaz Ebrahim grew up in Iran, moved to the United States in 2012 when she was 24 years old to continue her education in Masters of Architecture at Iowa State University. She graduated in 2014 and moved to Dallas, Texas to work as a designer in architecture. Navaz lost her only sibling, her sister, Nilufar, and her brother-in-law, Nilufar's new husband, Saeed, when Ukrainian Flight 752 was shot down in that early morning of January 8th, 2020. Right now, Navaz Ebrahim joins us from Dallas, Texas today. Hello, Navaz.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being part of this. First of all, I'm so sorry for your loss of Nilufar and Saeed. We are hearing from families of the victims of this horrific event, and I know it doesn't get much easier, especially on an anniversary date like this, but what can you tell us about where you are at right now, what you are feeling exactly 1 year to the date you lost your beloved sister?
As the days go by, it's getting even more difficult. There are still so many unanswered questions. We feel like we're lost, and so much anger. We have so much anger because we still don't know why this happened to our loved ones that night, why they didn't close the sky that night during the tension. So it's just getting even more difficult, and it's very difficult to believe this actually happened. It's like we're frozen in time, we're stuck.
Wow. You've gone from lost to lost. I mean, it doesn't, there's no, you're right. There don't seem to be any answers forthcoming even a year later, huh?
Yes, unfortunately, the Iranian government, they haven't done any cooperation with any of the involved countries. All they did was to hide the truth. And as you know, they lied for 3 days after the crime, and they hijacked a lot of the funerals. They stole the victims' belongings. They bulldozed the crash site, and they called them martyr. Although I think martyr, with all due respect, has a different definition.
Right. And
it's just several cases of harassing the families. And
you know, let me I'm going to get to some of that, and I want to ask you about it, but first and foremost, I suppose, I mean, part of the imperative for us doing this special is to keep the memory of those we've lost. And all of us, I think on the team working on this show, know somebody who was on that flight or had friends, and of course people like you who had dear family members on that flight. We want to keep the memories alive. So let me ask you about Nilufar for a little bit. I mean, I know interestingly, like 2019, the year before, had started as a very happy year for you both, because you and Nilufar had gotten married. You had big changes in your life. What can you tell us about her?
she was the kindest and sweetest heart sister. I still can't believe she's gone. She was so caring. She was very selfless, and she would always care for others. She would put others before herself. And at the time the crime happened, they downed the airplane. She had just submitted her thesis in September 2019, and her graduation ceremony was 10 days after the downing of the flight, and which she never made it to. And she was doing her master's in business psychology at Kingston University in London. And she had already started doing charity work and contributing to the community. She had several plans. She wanted to go back to London, of course, starting her her married life with her husband, Said, and she wanted to start looking for a job, and everything was just about to start.
Yeah.
And also Said, he was like the brother I never had. He was super smart, very kind, very honest, and he was very smart and intelligent, very educated, and he was a structural engineer, and he was working on larger scale infrastructure construction project in London. And at the same time, he was doing his PhD.
You know, from what I hear, is it true that they had literally just gotten married in London, and that part of the journey they were on is that they had gone to Iran to celebrate for 3 weeks before returning to London via this flight? Is that correct?
Yes, their only reason to travel to Iran was to celebrate their wedding. And as you mentioned, 2019 was a very happy year for our families, because a few months before their wedding, I got married, and so we were just over the moon. That year was a happy year, and I wish we could return to those days.
Navaz, is your family mostly in Iran?
Yes, my parents, they live in Iran.
And how have they coped with this?
Every morning when I get up, I have my family picture. It's a picture from Niloufar and Said wedding. It's on the shelf next to my bed, and I look at the picture, and if someone looks at that picture and doesn't know us and have never met us, and they meet us today, I think we all look 10 years older comparing to the picture that was this day last year. So it's just unbelievable to put this into words, how unbearable and unmeasurable this pain has been for all of us.
When was the last time you spoke to your sister?
Niloufar and Said, they called us when they were on the plane. They were on board. They called us to say goodbye, and my husband and I, we had just got back from work, and I hadn't checked the news yet, and I didn't know Iran has attacked, did a missile attack to the U.S. bases in Iraq. So Niloufar was the one who broke the news to me. I didn't know the tension that night. And she said, I don't know if you've checked the news yet, but this is the situation, and I don't want you to be worried about us. And she just cared about us, not getting stressed over the news. And we had no idea the worst was coming for them.
How did you find out?
So as soon as we spoke with them, we just turned on the news channel, and we kept following on the news, and it was a very stressful night, and everybody was worried for a war between Iran and the U.S. And we had U.S. news on TV, and at the same time, I was checking my Facebook to follow the Iranian news channels and looking for the latest news. So I just remember that here on the TV, the U.S. news, they were saying that it's probably good news because the President of the United States, he has decided not to come out from the White House, and he has decided not to make an announcement, and this is good news. But immediately after, I saw on the Iranian news channels on my Facebook that a Ukrainian flight has crashed due to technical issues. And obviously I got very stressed. And at the time, I didn't know which airline Nilüfer and Said were flying with. But still, I didn't dare to open the news. And I think a few minutes passed and the news updated that a Ukrainian flight has crashed and all the passengers have died. And that was when I just couldn't manage my anxiety. I started Googling which flight this was, when was the departure time. And all I knew was that they were going to fly around 5 a.m. Tehran time. And I remember on Google it was saying it was a Ukrainian flight number PS752. And the departure time was around 5 a.m, but it had over an hour delay.
Yes.
So then I called my parents in Iran, and I think I woke them up because Nilüfer and Said went to the airport by themselves, and my parents were sleeping then. I woke them up, and usually I never call them that early in the morning, and obviously they got worried, and I don't think I even said hi to my mom. Just as soon as she picked up the phone, I asked her, "Mom, can you tell me which airline Nilüfer and Said were flying with?" And immediately she got worried, and she said, "What has happened?" It was the Ukrainian flight. Oh. And I told her, one Ukrainian flight has crashed. Can you check the flight number for me? And they started screaming, and she managed to find the flight information. And I never forget when she said flight PS752, and at that time I think we were just screaming, and and she kept asking, "What has happened? Are they alive? Should I go to the airport?" And then my husband grabbed the phone, and he wanted to calm my parents down, and he said, "We don't know yet. They may be okay." And I just couldn't tell them that I already know all the passengers have died. Huh. So I just couldn't tell my parents, and I just whispered into my husband's ears that no one has survived. Everybody has died. And I think it was a little bit after that my parents heard it on the news that no one survived. So it was everything. Our lives changed after that night, for sure.
How has your life changed?
Nothing feels normal anymore. Nothing feels normal anymore. And I think the worst is that we don't know the truth, and no justice has been served. Nobody has been prosecuted. Nobody has been questioned. Nobody has even quitted. And on the Iranian TV, they're even praising the IRGC head, Mr. Hajizadeh, and we're not even close to having any peace with this. It's like we can't say goodbye to our loved ones properly. It's like they're still here with us, and they're expecting us to fight for them.
You know, you've implied a couple of times. I mean, you've called it a crime, and we, and you've also said we don't have the answers. I mean, we do know that the IRGC shot down this plane. That's about the extent of what we know in terms of empirically knowing. There are many who don't believe that this was a human error, as the Islamic Republic claims. I'm guessing that it sounds like you don't believe this was an error.
No. The human error scenario is just what the Iranian government trying to have the world believe, but it's just so ridiculous, and I don't think anybody can believe that, especially the aviation experts, the military experts. They have called the reports that were released by Iran so far ridiculous. So it's not, of course, it's not believable what they're trying to tell us. And there's no way that a huge passenger flight can be mistaken with a 6-meter long cruise missile. It's just under complicated Russian-made what's it called, air surface-to-air
Missiles,
machine. So they say it's a very complicated Russian-manufactured machine, and such a mistake with these equipments, it's just unbelievable.
Navaz, let me ask you. I mean, you obviously you would know that this has been, I think, in a positive way, I would say, because the entire nation sort of rallied behind it. This has been quite a big story in Canada because there were a lot of Iranian Canadians on that flight, but there were people, victims from around the world, and you're in the United States. How much are you able to coordinate with the other families, those, say, who are in Canada? Have you been keeping in touch with other families of victims to console each other as a community, or to be part of taking action?
Yes, I'm so thankful that we have found each other, and it's like we have a big family. And we talk to each other every day, and mostly it's about sharing the news, considering this crime and any updates. And of course, we share our grief with each other. And I think it has helped a lot, being together and having the same goal. I mean, of course, the time, unfortunately, won't go backwards, and our loved ones won't come back to us, unfortunately, but at least we have some reason to wake up each morning, and that is to find justice, to find the truth. And I think being together as an association of the victims' families has helped, and we are hopeful to accomplish this goal.
Have you heard about this intimidation or threats from Tehran and its agents towards people who have been towards the families of the victims, or have you or your family been subject to this kind of harassment?
Yes, there have been several cases. From the first day, as you know, they lied for 3 days, and they tried to visit a lot of the families. They pressured the families to come in and visit them in person. And of course, that wasn't helping because they are the murderers, and who wants to see the murderers in their own house? So that was another harassment. And they hijacked some of the funerals. The officials, like I said, the authorities, they haven't been persecuted, they haven't been questioned, they're even praised on the Iranian TV. And they've arrested so many people only because they lit a candle in the memory of our loved ones. And like I said, they stole the victims' belongings. They bulldozed the crash site. And one of the worst things they did, they are comparing several times the number of COVID COVID cases that unfortunately passed away because of COVID with the number of Flight PS752 victims, and they're trying to say, oh, this wasn't a big deal. There were only 176 people. Look at how many people has passed away by COVID.
Right.
And it's just
that's an absurd strategy.
Everything is so unbearable.
What would justice look like to you? I mean, what is there anything that would actually feel satisfying to you at this point?
I think that true justice is that if we could have our loved ones back, but unfortunately that can't happen. So the only thing that we can do is we want all the involved countries, Ukraine, Canada, Sweden, Afghanistan, and UK to put even more pressure on Iran and take the case to an international court of justice and really prosecute the ones who were responsible that night. Whoever decided to keep the airspace open for all the commercial flights that night, and who decided to shut down this flight. I think that's the only thing we can do, and that's our basic right as families to know what has happened and who was responsible.
I thank you so much, Khayli Mochakiram, for taking the time today to be part of this and to continue to have conversations that can't be easy for you. I want to end off maybe by giving some more time to the memory of Nilufar and your young sister who had just gotten married, who was just graduating, who was just starting her life. When you think about her, what is a fond memory, or where does your mind go to? Where is something you want to share with us about her before we let you go?
She was actually my older sister, and one of the most beautiful memories I have of her is that the last time I visited Iran, I got to Iran on my birthday night, and she came and picked me up from the airport. And by the time we got home, although it was late night, she had already organized a surprise birthday party, and she had already invited all my close friends, and she put lots of gifts over my bed. So that was how she was. She was so kind. She was very kind, and I've really missed her.
Navaz, I thank you. Please take care of yourself in Dallas. Regards to you and your family, and perhaps one day we can speak under better circumstances. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
دلم تنگه برای گریه کردن، کجاست مادر، کجاست گهواره همون گهواری که خاطرم نیست، همون امنیت حقیقی و راست، همون جایی که شاهزاده قصه همیشه دختر فقیر رو میخواست، همون شهری که قد خود من بود از این دنیا، ولی خیلی بزرگتر، نه ترس سایه بود، نه وحشت باد، نه من گم می شدم، نه یک کبوتر دلم تنگه برای
This is a special edition of Roqe Flight PS752. We will not forget. We're coming to you on our platforms SoundCloud, Spotify, Telegram, Instagram, iTunes, and YouTube. Our next guest is a lawyer and a human rights activist and a senior fellow with the Macdonald-Laurier Institute's Centre for Advancing Canada's Interests Abroad. He's also a former senior policy advisor on human rights to Global Affairs Canada. Kaveh Shahrooz is a graduate of Harvard Law School and the University of Toronto. He has written widely on human rights issues and international affairs. He recently led a successful effort to convince Canada's Parliament to recognize the 1988 massacre of political prisoners in Iran as a crime against humanity under international law. And right now, Kaveh Shahrooz joins me from Toronto. Hello, sir.
Good to be with you, Jean.
Thank you for doing this, Kaveh. I know you are someone who profoundly cares about Canada, Iran, and the citizens in both countries, and you've done so much work in this regard. First of all, in terms of you as a person, emotionally, what are you reflecting on 1 year later after this horrific downing of Flight 752?
Yeah, it's a combination, I would say, of grief and anger. Grief for the understandable reasons. So many people in our community were affected. I mean, innocent people, even if they were not in our community, obviously we would be saddened. But these were people near and dear to us. I know people who were on that plane. They were not close friends of mine, but they were people that I had a passing familiarity with. And I'm deeply saddened by the loss of so many innocent and young lives. But also alongside that, it's just this anger that's been building for a year over the Iranian regime's first effort to deny their role in the massacre, and then subsequently all their efforts at cover up and misleading the international community and simply not cooperating, and just deepening the pain of the families even further.
So, I mean, when the Canadian government, that you would know something about, says it will seek justice and accountability, 1 year later, we're beginning to wonder exactly what that means. I mean, despite the best of intentions, perhaps. Does it mean a public apology? Does it mean allocation of compensation to family members? We've seen a little bit of that. Does it mean recognizing a specific person in the Iranian regime or government who's responsible for this tragedy? What does this mean now, justice and accountability?
You know, your guess is as good as mine. I've been hearing all the noises coming out of Global Affairs and the Office of the Minister. They say all the right things, but at a fairly abstract level. They say, we want accountability. Well, what does that actually mean? Iran has not been cooperating with the investigation for the most part. They've, in fact, engaged in a cover-up. And, what I want to see is, naming and shaming of specific individuals that were responsible for this, not some low-level officer that may have pressed the button that shot the rocket, but actually, senior leaders of the Iranian regime that were behind this. I would want to see some action taken by Canada at the International Court of Justice, where states can go to complain against one another. I would want to see action at the UN. I would want to see some effort at getting accountability in Canadian courts against the Iranian regime. And I'd want to see us using our legislation. We've got Magnitsky sanctions laws on the books that allow us to sanction high-ranking Iranian officials. And we simply haven't used this legislation. And I think it's time that we do that and we demand accountability. All the nice words coming out of, the Prime Minister's mouth and the Minister's mouth and that of Ralph Goodale, they're all nice and good, but ultimately we need some action and the families need some action.
So specifically, based on some of what you just said, give me a few steps. What do you believe are the key next steps Canada, Ukraine, our allies must take for Tehran and those senior level folks that you just talked about to accept full responsibility?
Yeah, I think the first step is for Canada to actually officially say that this was an act carried out at the highest levels, or the orders came at the highest levels of the Iranian regime. This was not, simple human error. This is something that Minister Goodale alluded to, and Minister Champagne sort of affirmed. So we need to actually say that the responsibility for this lies at the upper echelons of the Iranian regime. After that, we've got legislation in Canada. We've got Magnitsky legislation that I just mentioned. We need to actually sanction these people. And then we need to take our complaint to the International Court of Justice along with the Ukrainians. And we need to kind of work with the international community to isolate the Iranian regime over its attempts to lie about this crime. There's really no other name for it other than just a mass crime.
So to state the obvious, based on what you've just intimated, you do not believe the shooting of Flight 752 was a human error, as the Islamic Republic claims?
Look, I don't have any inside information, but I would say that the Iranian regime's story from day one has not added up. First they tried to deny it, then they tried to clean up the crash site as quickly as possible to remove evidence. They've not cooperated with the international community. All of this points to a guilty conscience. All of this points to a regime that's trying to cover up something horrendous that it did, that goes beyond simple error.
So last week, or a couple of weeks ago, Wednesday, December 30th, Iran announced the allocation of $150,000 in compensation to each of the families of the 176 victims of Ukrainian Airlines Flight PS752. Canadian and Ukrainian officials say the amount should have been negotiated, hasn't been. What do you think of this action by the Iranian government?
Well, like all the actions they've taken, it's been sort of done in secret. It's been done quietly without consultation with the families or the other stakeholders, in this case, Ukraine and Canada. And the amount seems laughably low. So all to say that I don't think it's a legitimate offer and it shouldn't be accepted by the families. Obviously, it's up to them, but none of the steps that you would associate with a fair effort at compensation were taken here.
The Canadian government, as you know, has named January 8th a National Day of Remembrance for victims of air disasters, which many folks in our community, in the Iranian diaspora and Canadians have celebrated. But do you think, I only bring this up because some folks have brought it up to me, do you think it should have been more specific to PS752?
I do. To me, this sounds a lot like an all lives matter kind of moment where, we're talking about all air disasters. This was not an air disaster, for one thing. This was not a plane malfunctioning. This was a very specific criminal act by a criminal regime with a history of criminality. And, I think the day of commemoration is a great thing, but I think it should have been very specific and very focused on this particular criminal act by the Iranian government.
Kaveh, before I let you go, I do appreciate your insights. Where do you, if you zoom out, I mean, you've mentioned the history of this regime, etc. Where do you situate this horrific event in the difficult history of Iran and Iranians over the last half century?
I think this is part of a long-standing 40-year pattern of criminality and absence of accountability by the Iranian regime. The regime that has carried out massacre after massacre, that shoots people on the streets, is the same one that shoots a plane out of the sky. It's the same one that assigns somebody like Ebrahim Raisi, a man implicated in mass murder, to actually be the lead investigator on the Iranian side. I think this is just part and parcel of a regime that has no respect for human life, no respect for human rights, no respect for rule of law. And I think ultimately, this is one issue that has to be dealt with, but there's a larger problem with the Iranian regime that the international community has to ultimately deal with. And
on that note, it's occurred to me recently that in the absence of a unified, organized opposition, as you know, that we can be quite factional in the Iranian diaspora, that one of the ways that change may come is from the increasing number of groups and associations and organizations that are developing in response to different atrocities that are taking place. So a group that comes together globally, outraged by what happened to Navid Afkari. And in this case, the Association for Justice that we're seeing around PS752, that the sum of all of these groups around the world will become quite powerful in challenging a regime that has yet to be challenged enough to fall. What do you think of that?
I think that's exactly right. When you look at how dictatorships fall, it's ultimately when they alienate more and more of their population internally and also just lose allies externally. The Iranian regime has very few external allies. And internally, it's lost all legitimacy. Women don't want it. Ethnic and religious minorities don't want it. Business people don't want it, so on and so forth. And internationally, it's committed so many crimes that people in the diaspora are largely turned against it. And I think part of what the Iranian regime does is it tries to fracture both Iranians inside the country and those in the diaspora. To the extent that these groups can come together with their different grievances and unite under a common flag and demand accountability, demand free elections or a free referendum, that's when we're going to see the Iranian regime finally fall.
Kaveh Shahrooz, I thank you very much for your time today, sir.
Thank you so much, Jian.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
اما نرود یادم آن روز که خندانی آن روز که از شادی باران بهار باران بهار آن روز که آزادی آن روز که باور کن آن روز که شوریده رقصنده میدان رقصنده میدان.
You are listening to a Roqe Special Edition Flight PS752. We will not forget. I'm Jian Ghomeshi. You can find the hub of all things Roqe at our website, roqemedia.com, where we have also linked to the website ps752justice.com. We invite you to check that out. Our next guest grew up in Tehran, got his bachelor's degree in computer engineering, and moved to Canada in 2010 at the age of 24 with his family in search of a better life. Nima Neyestani then began working as a systems engineer in cloud hosting and IT service provider companies. Nima lost his dear partner, Shadi Jamshidi, in the downing of Flight PS752 1 year ago. Nima and Shadi met in early 2017 and were planning on getting married in the summer of 2020. Right now, Nima Neyestani joins me from Toronto today. Hello, sir.
Hi, Jian.
Thank you for doing this, Nima. First of all, condolences once again to you and your family. I know you lost your love, you lost your partner, Shadi, on this flight last year. I can only imagine it has been a very difficult year and that this anniversary is making it all very real again. What can you tell us about how you're feeling 1 year later?
Oh, well, it's really, really difficult for me to describe. I don't even know. I don't think there are any words that can do justice to the way I'm feeling and we, as the families of victims, feel. It has been getting harder and harder as time went by, at least for me. And now it's getting to a very difficult situation. I feel like that I'm reliving all those moments 1 year ago and again, all over again.
You know, it's the old cliche is that it gets easier over time and that time heals. You're saying it's getting harder. Tell me why.
I wish I could. I honestly don't know why, but that's not to say it was easy in the beginning. It was not. It was exactly the opposite. It was unimaginable pain since day one. But as time went by, I guess maybe I can put it this way. Maybe because, at least for me, the shock had been so enormous that maybe I had some sort of a denial in the beginnings, which is starting to fade away as time goes by, and I'm starting to really understand that this has happened to her and she's never coming back.
Yeah. You know, part of the intent on doing this kind of a remembrance let alone doing this on a regular basis, talking about what happened, is to keep the memory alive of the people who were on that flight, including, I think that everybody on the Roqe team knows at least one person or was friends with somebody, or we all have connections to people that we lost. In your case, this life partner that you had big plans with. So in the spirit of keeping those memories alive, tell us a bit about Shadi. Tell us a bit about her and what you loved about her.
Oh, where do I start? Shadi was the love of my life. She was different for me since the very first moment that I saw her. She was really sweet, kind, smart. We shared a lot of passions. And Shadi means joy, and I think if I wanted to make it short, she was really the embodiment of joy in my life and in everyone's life who knew her. And surely enough, joy has left our lives since she's gone. She was so happy. She was passionate about life. She knew how to live and experience every moment lived every moment to the fullest. Every day with her was an adventure. Honestly, I don't remember one day that was the same as the day before. We just had so much good memories, so much fun. We did so many different things and adventures together. We really, really miss her.
Nima, what was the arrangement at this time last year? She had gone to visit family in Iran, or why were you here and she was coming back from Iran?
Yes, I was here. Unfortunately, she left. Sorry, she went there to do some to visit her father. The main reason was she's lost her mother when she was 20, maybe around 10 years ago, 10, 11 years ago. And Shadi really loved her family. That was one of the most important things in her life. So she went back after 5 years, actually. She went back home to visit her father and take care of some other stuff. That was the reason.
When was the last time you spoke to her?
When the plane was taken off.
Oh wow! You actually talked while she was on the plane?
No, we were texting. We were texting maybe half an hour before, or maybe it was an hour. I don't remember exactly. Before the plane was taken off, we found out that Iran had hit the U.S. bases in Iraq, and we were worried. So, and we were texting back and forth. Obviously, she was very worried that a war was coming, and she was actually worried for her father, who was staying behind. And I remember I told her that she shouldn't worry, and even if there is a war, they wouldn't harm civilians. And I just wished her to for her plane to take off and not for it to get canceled, so that she at least gets away in time. And I told her to keep in touch with me and let me know when the plane actually started rolling off the line. So that's when I received the last message from her. She said that we're taking off, the plane's taking off, and everything's under control. That's exactly what she said.
Wow, Nima. Wow. How did you then? How do you find out that the plane has not even made it out of Iranian airspace?
Well, about half an hour later that night, I went to bed. And before basically before I went to sleep, I just checked my phone, checked the news on my phone for one last time to make sure that nothing has happened. And I saw this post that was posted maybe 10 minutes before that said that the Ukrainian flight, something's happened to it. Basically, nothing was clear at that time. So at first I couldn't believe it. Maybe I even closed my eyes for a few seconds to go to sleep, but then I opened them right back up, and then got up and sat behind my computer and started looking at different news websites and stuff. And the news was still very new, and it wasn't posted in many news agencies. So I didn't know what to do. I just put on my coat, got in the car, and started driving.
Where did you drive to?
Well, my initial thought was to go to my parents, but then I thought to myself that I still don't know what's exactly happened, and if I tell them right now, they might they might not be able to take it. And I didn't want to bring this news when I didn't really know exactly what's happened on them.
Yeah.
They just loved Shadi as if she was their own child. So I decided to go to her brother's house, who also lives here in Toronto. And as I was on the way, I called him. And as the phone was ringing, I was hoping that he already knows. But when he picked up the phone, and by the way he greeted me, I immediately knew that he didn't. And so I told him, and him and his wife, after a few seconds of silence, they just broke into tears, and I went to their house.
You know, we still don't have empirical evidence, as you know, of exactly what happened on that night 1 year ago, other than knowing that the Iranian military, the IRGC, did shoot down the plane. There are many who don't believe this was a human error, as the Islamic Republic has claimed. Where are you at on this? What are your feelings about how this happened?
Well, I definitely am amongst those people who don't believe this was simply just a human error. At first, in the first 3 days, I really hoped that it was a mechanical failure, but then it turned out that it wasn't. And now they say it's a human error, but it's really, really difficult, almost unbelievable, almost impossible, to be honest. There are so many evidence. During this past year, basically full time, we as the families and the association, we've been researching, and we've been trying to find truth, and the research and the evidence shows that this is almost next to impossible to be just a human error like this.
We've heard a lot of stories, Nima, about how families of the victims of Flight 752 have faced harassment or threats from Tehran or IRGC agents, or faced intimidation. Have you or any of your family members been subject to this kind of harassment?
No. We have not, but we never went back. None of my family members nor I never did go back. As a matter of fact, I haven't been back since I moved to Canada. It's almost 11 years now. But I've heard from a lot of families that this has happened to them, and this is definitely truth.
It sounds I mean, I feel almost ridiculous talking about closure, as if you and the other family members and Shadi's dad and everybody can somehow get closure after an event like this. But we do talk about justice. You talk about justice. The Association of Family Members talks about justice. What does it mean to you, Nima? What would be the kind of justice that would really make you feel like is deserved?
Well, you know what? To be honest, I feel like there's going to be no justice would be real justice in this scenario. Real justice would be for them to come back. But the next best thing would be for everyone who was responsible, from the very person that pushed the button up until the person who was in charge of everything. They all, justice for me at least, means for them to show up in an international court of justice and be prosecuted for this crime against humanity. I know it's far-fetched, but we as the families of victims, we only have one goal now, and that's it. And we're going to do everything to achieve it, or we're going to die trying.
Nima, I thank you so much for taking the time today. I know doing these interviews doesn't make things any easier for you, and I really appreciate you continuing to spread the word and joining us on Roqe. Let me, before I let you go, ask you one more question about the woman you were going to marry this past summer. If you had the chance to speak to Shadi right now, what would you want to say to her?
There's so much to say, honestly. I'll just tell her I love her for the one last time.
Nima, thank you so much, and take care of yourself.
Thank you, Jian. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
چه آرزوهایی که نمرد، چه سینه هایی که نسوخت.
کسی دیگه تون بیاد رخت عروسی ندود.
باور کنه هم آواز نشکست بال پرواز. از من نپرس اونم کجاست، تون همه بیرونه. ای هم قبیله چی بگم، قبیله سرگردونه.
غربت از اون خاک پاک ما رو جدا نکرده.
This is a Roqe Special Edition, Flight PS752. We will not forget. We're coming to you on our platforms, SoundCloud, Spotify, Instagram, Telegram, iTunes, and YouTube. And we do invite you to subscribe if you like what you're hearing and want to learn more about our content. Our next guest has a wealth of experience in aviation and flight safety. He is a retired pilot, an airline pilot's instructor, employment standards officer with Canada's Ministry of Labour, and airlines safety inspector for U.S. Army Airborne Standardization. Amir Kasravi also organized the Iranian Pilot and Flight Engineers Association whilst still in Iran in the 1970s. Right now, Amir Kasravi joins us from Toronto today. Hello, sir.
Hello.
Thank you very much for joining us on this special. Amir, what are you reflecting on 1 year after the horrific news broke about the shooting down of a civilian aircraft, Ukrainian Flight PS752?
Well, it takes me back to my years of the experience in aviation that we, as a pilot, would think about nothing but the safety. And the safety means that we have to follow all the rules and all the regulation and follow all the instruction. And all of a sudden, something happens like this, which is totally out of line, and it's not something that we can digest. I put myself in the seat of that pilot in the last few seconds, how terrible he was feeling, how hard he was trying to save the passenger's life, and so forth and so on. It was really, really something that is completely unexpected for the pilot. Things like this happens.
So, I mean, you are an aviation expert. I want you to help us understand some of the facts of what happened on January 8th, 2020, that fateful day. What do we know today technically about how this flight was shot down that we didn't know in the immediate aftermath?
I try to stick to the rules and the regulations and also avoid from the politics of the thing.
Sure.
Because we're not talking about the technical issues, and what we know for the facts is that this airplane was shut down, and Iran, as a sovereign country who's responsible for the safety and security of the airspace for the commercial airlines, they actually approved the flight plan of this airplane on that day, just few hours after they attacked the American base in Iraq.
Right.
And they cleared this airplane for takeoff. And then the fact is that after 2-3 minutes, the missile attack, the first one and the second one, caused this airplane to crash. Now, these are all the facts. And up to 48 hours, Iran actually denied. Well, we are talking in Roqe, so I better be Roqe.
Please.
Iran actually lied about what happened because they knew that they shut down the airplane. They knew that there was 2 missiles, and there was a pilot report that they saw the airplane falling down from the sky, but still they denied it for 48 hours.
Let me just stop you there, because I want to take what you've said one point at a time. First of all, to give context around the airspace, because this is a very pivotal issue, that the airspace was open for civilian aircraft. So the downing of the Flight 752 on January 8th, as you say, came just hours after Iran had carried out missile strikes on 2 air bases housing U.S. forces in Iraq. This was in response, ostensibly at least, to the killing of Commander Qasem Soleimani in a U.S. drone strike in Baghdad on the 3rd of January. So there were extreme tensions and a prospect of war between Iran and the United States. Everybody was talking about this. My question, under the Convention on International Civil Aviation rules, should Iran not have been closing the airspace to civilian flights? I mean, I don't know about this stuff, but that seems just obvious, does it not?
Yes, of course. There is a rules about the conflict zones that all the pilots are aware. When they look at their maps, all the conflict zones are actually identified, and it has the dimension, it has the altitude, it has all the information that you want, how far you have to be from this conflict zone, and this is a NOTAM. Sometimes NOTAM is a notice to the airman. And this NOTAM comes sometimes temporarily because something happens right now, and they send this NOTAMs to all the airlines, all the operators, and all the authorities to avoid those areas. And that's, as you said, based on the Convention of Chicago. Also, there was document 10,084 after MH17, which was shot down by Russian rebels, eastern corner of the Ukrainian, and they killed all the people, and they denied it. And of course, after 4 years of investigation, they had to prove that there was a missile. And this document came out reinforcing the fact that conflict zones has to be notified to all the airlines operators.
So was there a NOTAM, as you say, in this case? Was there a specific directive issued to pilots on the morning of that flight?
There was none. There was only one NOTAM that it was issued 1 hour and 20 minutes after Iran attacked the Iraq by FAA, Federal Aviation Administration of the United States, that you should call it kind of Civil Aviation Authority of the US.
Okay.
They issued that NOTAM and they notified all the American registered airplane to actually avoid Iranian airspace because of the high conflict zone and because of the situation existing there.
But that wouldn't affect a Ukrainian flight in Iranian airspace?
Well, that is the shortcoming of the ICAO. And also the question is whether or not EASA, which is a European safety organization, they were aware of the FAA NOTAM or not. If they were, Ukraine is part of the Europe, so they should have been notified. So there are a lot of questions has to be answered here. We don't have the answer yet.
Can I just ask you why would Iran keep the airspace open for civilian flights? I mean, what could the reason be? In this kind of tense environment.
We don't want to get into something that we don't know really what happened behind the closed door, but there's lots of fact that points to something that actually when we go and talk about the third report from the Civil Aviation Organization of Iran, you would know that they knew about it. It was, as you mentioned, it was a high alert situation in Iran. There was a retaliation, announcement between two countries, and the airspace of Iran was totally unsafe for commercial airplane, but still they kept it open. Now, was it by mistake or was it a willful misconduct? Was it a decision-making process behind the closed door to maintain the airspace open for reasons?
Do you know anything about the chain of command, about who would make those decisions? I mean, in assessing the ultimate accountability, if we want to know who would make the call on this, do we know what the chain of command is in terms of firing missiles like this in the IRGC?
Well, that must be actually the military situation here that we're talking about. And of course, it's a Sepah. And we don't know who made the decision, but there was an intentional decision to attack Iraq. There is no doubt about it. They knew that there going to be a retaliation. This is a fact. But still, they decided not to close the airspace. They knew that they should do that. It is not that country doesn't know about rules and regulation of the aviation. And this is because of the Iranian revolutionary people. They don't know about these things. They do know about these things. I have a lot of proof to tell you why they know about it. Because at some point, they refer to the specific sections of the ICAO rules, and they know about all these rules, and they enforce it actually in many cases in Iran. So they knew about it. But why this disregard about closing the airspace? That's the question that the Iranian government has to clarify, in the final report why they did not close the airspace. What was the human factors? What was the decision-making process that ended up not closing this airspace to the commercial airline?
Well, then there's a couple of other things that once the airspace is left open that don't totally add up in terms of the human error claims of the Islamic Republic. I mean, among those questionable assertions that Iran has made about how things went wrong in this human error, as they've called it, was that the missile defense battery was misaligned by an enormous directional error of 107 degrees, which I understand is if not unprecedented, is quite odd. That the IRGC personnel lost all contact with the command center, and that operators mistook a 130-foot-long commercial passenger jet taking off and ascending from east to west for some sort of threatening missile coming in from west to east. Do any of those points make sense to you?
Well, the government of Iran needs to respond to all these questions. And if they don't, they are actually, they put themselves in a position of in fault. And historically, no matter what they do, this is something that happened intentionally because somebody decided to target this airplane with missiles. Somebody pulled the trigger intentionally. So all this thing has done intentionally. Now they want to have a narrative of story that they made about this mistakes, a single person operator that misaligned his true north within his monitor. And then, as you mentioned, there was some common sense. The airplane coming from the airport is taking off. He can see it on his radar monitor. And the airplane going actually toward the west, as you mentioned. All these things point to the fact that the story that they have actually provided after 6-7 months of not handing in the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder to be decoded, they bought time to make the narrative, to say to the other peoples that there was one mistake. Okay, now you said it. Prove it. How we can verify all these things that you're saying? Why there is only one narrative? Why there is not other narratives? That who made the decision not to close the airspace? What was the reason behind that? Normally, an investigation into airplane accident, a crash, normally when it happens, Jan, it is based on the fact under Annex 13 of the ICAO that the cause of the accident is unknown. So the whole functionality of the Annex 13 to investigate an accident is based on not knowing what caused the accident. Right. Now we have to put the pieces together one by one, going through all the information, black boxes, this and that, to find out the chain of the error caused that accident.
So, Amir, let me ask you this. I mean, given your years as a pilot yourself, given your years of working in and around safety on various continents when it comes to aviation, and I don't ask this to assign any blame. I'm actually genuinely curious about this. Could on the morning of January 8th in 2020, could the pilot of Ukrainian Flight PS752 have declared that he doesn't want to fly the plane? Would that have been an option for him to say, this is too dangerous, we're not going to do this?
Well, if he knew it, that what happened that day in Iran, if I were the pilot, I would have done it. If I were the pilot of that airplane, if I knew it that there's a high alert in the airspace, I wouldn't fly the airplane.
And
I may
you have the right to
my job.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Right.
I may have lost my job, but my first and the most important thing is the safety of myself and all the passengers. So could he do this? Not in this time of the year that we are right now. Don't forget that aviation evolved since 1903 to 2020. At some point, pilots, they had all the authorities. They made all the decisions, and their decision was final. Nobody could challenge the airplane captains as the authority, his decision. His decision was final. Not today. Today, there are so many different technologies available, and all the communication is available that everybody can communicate with everybody, no matter where you are around the world. So these days, this doesn't happen like that anymore. Pilots actually, as I should tell you, which I heard from one of the airline owners who was a friend of mine here in Toronto, he told me the airline pilots are just like the truck drivers. It doesn't make any difference. It's a job. We tell them what to do, they go and do it.
Do you believe, or I suppose, how optimistic are you that we will ever find out exactly what happened and caused the death of 176 innocent civilians 1 year ago?
There are so many facts available that we can actually, it leads us to the factual information and the factual analysis and the factual conclusion. There's no doubt about it. We have enough facts. We know the government of Iran, how during the Iran-Iraq war, they send the kids over the mines and things like this. Using the human shield is not something that Iran never used before. Yeah. I hate to say that, but is it possible? Of course, Iran has to prove it otherwise. It is not that we have to go and prove it that they did it. They have to prove it otherwise to the world, to everybody. You know, the whole aviation industry's eyes are on the final report to see what is the Iran's narrative. And if they don't come up with something satisfactory, nobody's going to accept it. And then there is a consequence.
Amir Kasravi, I thank you for bringing your experience, your perspective, and your thoughts on this important conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time. Merci. Thank you for this.
Thank you very much, Jan. Good question.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
یه پاییز زرد و زمستون سرد و یه زندون تنگ و یه زخم قشنگ و غم جمعه عصر و غریبی حسر و یه دنیا سؤال و تو سینم گذاشتی جهانی دروغ و یه دنیا غروب و یه درد عمیق و یه تیزی تیغ و یه قلب مریض و یه آه غلیظ و یه دنیا محال و تو سینم گذاشتی رفیقم کجایی دقیقاً کجایی تو بی من کجایی رفیقم کجایی دقیقاً کجایی تو بی من کجایی.
You are listening to a Roqe Special Edition, Flight PS752, We Will Not Forget. For the hub of all things Roqe, our website is roqemedia.com, and we have linked there to the website ps752justice.com. We invite you to check that out. Our final guests on this Remembrance Special also grew up in Iran before making a life in the West. Saghar Nourian and Ashkan Davoudpour both moved to the United States in 2012 and got married in 2014. Saghar got her PhD from Johns Hopkins University and is now working as a scientist. Ashkan got his master's degree in construction management from Germany and has been working as a civil engineer in the United States. Saghar's younger sister, Ghazal, was set to begin her PhD in Canada last year. They reunited with Ghazal and the family in December 2019 in Iran. Saghar and Ashkan returned to the U.S. on January 6th of last year. Sadly, Ghazal was not able to complete her journey to Canada on January 8th. Instead, she was another of the stellar young victims of Flight PS752. Right now, Saghar Nourian and Ashkan Davoudpour join me from Washington, D.C. Hello to both of you.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Hi, Jian. Thanks for inviting us to this interview.
Thank you for both doing this, and I know this conversations will never get easier. Saghar, first of all, condolences once again to you, Ashkan, and your family. You lost your dear sister Ghazal in this infuriating event. I can only imagine it's been a very difficult year, and this anniversary is making it all very real again. What can you tell us about how you are feeling 1 year later?
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a very difficult year for us, for the whole family. Very tough moments. We have like different feelings. First of all, obviously, we miss her a lot. I haven't seen her for one whole year, and it is unbelievable. We feel sad, we feel the grief, and also we are angry for what happened to her and the other passengers and the crew of this flight. It's been very difficult. It's been very, very difficult. What happened was like unbelievable and obviously unforgivable.
You know, everyone that we've spoken to so far on this special, almost everyone has said the exact same thing: grief and anger. Ashkan, would that describe you as well?
Yes, definitely. I mean, first of all, I cannot really believe it's been 1 year now. And, you know, I cannot imagine 1 year has passed and we have lost Ghazal. It's been a very difficult time. As I mentioned, it passed very fast, but when I think about it, of the things that happened to us, to the family, and what we went through, I cannot imagine how we are here right now.
One of the other family members I was speaking to just a bit ago was saying she feels like everything changed in her life, like nothing feels normal anymore. Saghar, does that ring for you?
Sure, like everything got changed, and so even I would say like last year that we went home, I and Ashkan, we were home. We were in Iran for the winter break. I was, whatever the problem were in Iran, I was trying to see the good side, and I was trying to enjoy my time being with my family. But after this incident that we had to go, after this tragedy, I want to say it like that, we had to go back to Iran to spend time with the family. I saw everything dark, and I couldn't see anything positive, and I would say whatever I saw was like dark and bad feelings and no positive points, no positive aspects of the life, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be happy again.
You know, the name of this special is We Will Not Forget, and obviously we want to take stock and understand what we can learn from this, where we can go forward, what justice means to you, the families of the victims, and what you're feeling 1 year later. But we would be remiss if we didn't first preserve those memories and talk about the people we've lost. So Saghar, tell us a bit about your sister. Tell us for those who didn't get the chance to meet Ghazal, what they would have had in their lives if they had met her.
Yeah, Ghazal, she was when it happened, she was 26, full of dreams and hopes, plans. She was very kind and smart, hardworking, dedicated, always had like plans for her life, and she knew what she wanted to do. And I and my brother, we both tried to help her like planning for her life. And so she was born in 1993, November 2nd, 1993, and she was the third kid of the family. And from the moment that she was born, we were all in love with her. Very beautiful, very pretty. And we always try to like talk about this, that beauty is part of it, but being clever, being nice, being kind to other people are other basically aspects of human being. And I think she was a true example of beauty and cleverness. She always tried to help others. Like when she got this admission from Western University in Canada, she always, like after that, she always tried to help other friends and classmates to get admission from Canada as well. I always see her like, I don't want to use past sentence because it's just hard for me to use past sentences. And I would say I always see her very calm and enjoy the moment. That's really something with her. I would say that was with her, that she was always trying to enjoy the moment, and I wanted everything the best for her. And she worked hard, and we tried to help as well. And she got accepted to a few universities within US as well. But because of the current administration, she was like, I can't just come to US and not being able to see the family for years and years. And she strongly believed that Canada is the land of humanity, and she decided to go to Canada.
She was going to do her PhD, and her dream was to become a professor, right?
Exactly. Her dream was to be a professor at the university. Even like right after she started the program for PhD, we talked about postdoctoral programs. We talked about what she can do after the PhD, all the plans, everything was set up. Even we started talking about what are going to be like good institutes or universities to get a postdoc. So everything was like set up for her, and I just can't believe what happened.
It's crushing that so many of the people, I mean, it's crushing to lose anyone, but so many of the folks that were on that plane were people who were beginning their lives, who were at the beginning of an amazing journey, like Ghazal. Ashkan, it's obviously got to be a strange twist of fate that you guys were on a flight only 2 days before, and that I guess you probably saw Ghazal 2 or 3 days before the fateful 752. Tell me about the last time seeing her, and tell me about reflecting on the fact that this flight could have been you guys. You left on January 6th, not January 8th.
Exactly. So yes, we were together in Iran. We met Ghazal. We were with the family. We spent time with family, and we had great time. And on the 6th, as you said, we had a flight back to the U.S. and Ghazal was at the airport, and we said goodbye, but we didn't know it's going to be the last time we see each other. It's very heartbreaking. We cannot believe it, as I said. And we lost her. We lost a beautiful, kind, loving, smart person. Not even us. I would say to Canada and maybe the whole world lost a great addition to humanity.
Saghar, you end up. Did you say you end up going back to Iran after this to be with family? And how have your family, how have your parents, how have your extended family been able to cope with this?
So right after what happened, like we got to US on January 6th, like at night, went to work on January 7th, and I was still jet lagged when this tragedy happened. And right after that, I and Ashkan, we both decided to go back to Iran, but it was not easy because all the flights got canceled after this tragedy. we had to like take it, our flight got canceled. We had to like reschedule our flights multiple times, but we were at the position that we wanted to go to Iran whatever happens. So finally, like getting multiple flights, we could go back to Iran, and the family they were ruined. Like they were, I couldn't believe what happened. Still, I can't believe it, but I couldn't believe that Mazad is not with us anymore to the time that I went back to Iran and I saw the family, I saw what happened, and I saw like all the big white flowers in front of our house, and it was like, oh my God, it is serious. And obviously it is not easy for the family at all. They're all heartbroken. The whole family is ruined.
How did you find out?
Yeah, so that was I was on the phone with her right before boarding, and she was, so first she didn't know about the high tension between Iran and US. I knew about that, and I told her that, oh, this thing happened in Iraq, and she started crying. She thought that there will be a war starting soon. And I tried to calm her down, and I was like, I'm sure nothing gonna happen to Tehran, because she was not worried for herself. She was mostly worried for my mom and for the family, because she thought that something gonna go wrong with Tehran. The wars will start in Tehran. And I tried to calm her down and say that, oh, everything gonna be all right. No worries. Just go and safely get to Canada, and we're gonna find a way for the rest of the family to get out of Iran. Don't worry. And that was the last conversation that I had with her. And again, as you mentioned earlier, like 2 days before that, we passed through the same road. We got out of we were boarded in the same airport, and everything was just so normal that I couldn't even believe that in less than 48 hours everything can get changed. And yeah, that was the last conversation, and so I was still jet lagged, as I said, and I was home with Ashkan, and we were like doing some unpacking because we just got back to US, right? So, and I was texting with my friends too, and like everyone was like super worried about the situation in Iran. But interestingly, I was not that worried, because I was like, oh, nothing gonna happen, we're gonna be all right. This kind of tensions has been around for a while, but nothing gonna go wrong. And I was like, oh, Gaza's flight is going to Europe, so it's not gonna go through like south of Iran, so it's gonna be safe. And I was 100% sure that nothing gonna go wrong to Tehran or anything, like any place close to Tehran.
Right.
And I had my conversation with her, and the last thing that she said, oh yeah, the crew are boarding too. And then she texted in like 10 minutes later that I'm boarding too. And I was like, okay, that's good. And as I said, I was jet lagged, and I fall asleep. And like after like an hour or so, I woke up, and I just looked at my phone, and I realized that I have like, I don't know, 10, 15 missed calls from my friends in California. And I was like, what is wrong? And, on the iPhone, like all the hot news are coming up. And one of the news was about like a plane near Tehran that is crashed. And I was like, this is impossible. I just opened that up, and I read the news, and I was like, no, it's not possible. It shouldn't be her. I'm sure it's not her. Right away, one of my friends, she called, and I was like, I didn't say hi. I didn't say a word. I just said, please tell me it's not Ukrainian airline. And she said, it is.
It was very hard.
She's gone. I was shouting. I was like, I can't believe this happening to me. Very, very hard moments. for me and Ashkan was by my side too, or both of us. Or like I was just shouting, and Ashkan was not in the room at the time, but he just heard me, and he was like, he got worried that something is going wrong with, if I'm okay. He opened the door and was like, yes, this thing happened, and he was like, it's impossible. And we read the news.
Yeah, I woke up in the middle of the night. I wanted to drink some water, I remember. So I went downstairs in the kitchen, and then I heard something like somebody is screaming. I thought, is it a fight or what is it? And then I realized the voice is coming from upstairs. So I ran upstairs. I saw Saghar on the ground, and I cannot forget her eyes up to date. And I was just saying, what happened? What has happened? Tell me. She was just screaming, and then she told me, Ghazal's plane has crashed. And I was really thought maybe somebody is making a joke or something. I got really angry what kind of joke it is. And I took the phone from Saghar. I was talking with a friend, and she told me, yes, it has crashed. And I couldn't believe, I didn't know what to do. I was just standing there. I talked to Saghar, but I didn't know what to say. I was just Googling to see if it's a wrong news or it's a fake news or something. Maybe some people are alive, but no, it wasn't that. It was really hard. I cannot forget Sagar's eyes.
Saghar, did your parents know, or did you have? What was that? How did you get in touch with them?
So it was early in the morning in Iran, right? That time.
Yes.
And we were like, do they know? We don't know what to do, but we decided to call my brother and first of all confirm the news with him. I was just all the time saying that maybe she missed the flight. Maybe she was not in that flight. Or Ashkan called my brother, and I could hear my brother crying. Saying that we lost her, and they were at the crash site. And they were at the crash site at the moment, and they saw very, very tragic scenes that time.
Wow.
So it was confirmed that she was on that plane, and we lost her. And my mom, I don't know what to say about her. Even now, she is still in shock and not doing well.
That's the fact that they were at the site. We've heard a lot about how the Iranian government scrubbed that site clean. Bulldozed all the materials there and everything within 24 hours. So they would have gotten there before that happened.
Right. Yeah, it was before the scene get cleaned up, basically.
So, Ashkan, to segue into, I don't know if we can be proactive about this, but just to segue into the practicalities, we still don't have empirical evidence of exactly what happened on that night 1 year ago, other than acknowledgement that the Iranian military, the IRGC, shot the plane down. There are many, as I've said through this special, who do not believe this was a human error, as the Islamic Republic maintains it was. What do you believe?
I believe Iranian government has not provided any rational, professional report or evidence that says it was indeed unintentional. So, unless they provide proof, and unless there's a investigation, a third-party investigation, independent investigation that approves it was indeed unintentional, we are to believe it was intentional, because there are many evidences, there are many sayings that it cannot happen. We are, we have an association, and within our association, we have a fact-finding committee, and we are family members, but we enjoy the experts, aviation and military experts.
Yes.
So it's not just us to say this was intentional just because we get emotional. We are in touch with people who are experts, and they cannot say, let's put it this way, they cannot say that based on what Iran has provided, they could conclude it was unintentional. So we wished in the beginning it was indeed unintentional, but there is no proof. Iran has not provided any proof on that. So we believe it was intentional unless proven otherwise.
You guys, we've heard many stories at this point about how the families of the victims of Flight 752 have faced intimidation or threats or harassment from the IRGC or from Tehran or from its agents. Have you or any of your family members been subject to this kind of harassment? Have you heard about this, Saghar?
I've heard about that for the families. Yes, I've heard about that. What I would say is like one of the obvious things is like they didn't return us any of the belongings of the passengers or the crew. Like for Ghazal, they gave us back her passport, which was very weird that the passport was in a good condition, but not her backpack, not her cell phone, not her laptop, not any of her belongings. It's just so, unbelievable that I could find her belongings when I was going through the pictures and the videos posted in here and there in different media.
Yes.
But they were not returned to us. Like this is there is nothing about it's not about the financial part, but it was their last thing that they had.
And does anybody give you a rationale for not handing this stuff back over?
Basically, I asked about that because I want to tell you this. They gave us like her password along with like a $1 bill. And I said, what is this $1 bill? And they said, that's for her. I was like, okay, how could you find this $1 bill? And how do you know that it's for her? First of all, she had like more than this with her, more money than this with her. But like you say that this is $1 belongs to Saghar Nourian. Tell me, how could you find it? Like because everything was in her backpack. And I think I don't know what they do. And they said, oh no, the backpack was like bloody. And that was a lie, because in one of the videos from Isna, I could see her backpack nice and clean sitting on the ground. But I don't know, because of any reason, they just decided to give me the passport and a $1 bill, which is like unbelievable.
Saghar, let me ask you both this. The word justice gets used. I mean, we talk about accountability, responsibility, but certainly I know members of your association, some of the folks we've interviewed today, talk about seeking justice. What does it mean for you, justice? How would you see justice accomplished in this case?
That's a very good question. Justice may have like different meanings to different people. For us, the families of the victims, justice is to have the people who ordered this to happen and the people who actually did that come to the court and be accountable for what they did and be punished for that. And the punishment is not just monetary punishment. The families doesn't care about the compensation as Iran is trying to put in the world, put on the news. The families, of course, compensation is important, it's their right, but it's not the first thing that they are willing to accept. I mean, they need to know what actually happened to their loved ones and who was responsible for that. And they want to see those people, to be tried as in the International Court of Justice.
Sorry, Ashkan. So just to make sure that everybody knows the latest, it was last week, I guess, or about a week and a half ago, that Iran announced the allocation of $150,000 in compensation to each of the families. So how did you react when you heard that?
As I mentioned, compensation is not the first priority, is not the second priority, and is not the last priority. I mean, what we need is to know what actually happened to our loved ones. Compensation doesn't provide that for us. Compensation, Iran just put a number and throw it, on the news and say, okay, $150,000 or whatever, just to see what is the feedback. The feedback of the families, the feedback of us, our family, is that we don't need your money for now unless we know what actually happened to our loved ones. This is what we need to know first. Justice to us is to know what happened and who was responsible for this crime.
Saghar?
Yeah, same. Like I don't want to talk about compensation at all, because you can't buy people's blood by money. And you can't put number and amount of money that you can pay and be like, okay, it is over and forget about it. I don't want to talk about compensation. What I want to talk about and what I want to hear about is like what happened that night, why this specific plane was selected to get shot and fire them with at least two missiles. If it was really unintentional, why two missiles were shot? And apparently, we are ordinary people, but what we know is that was a very high-tech system that Tor-1 that they shot the missiles from. Yes. How is that possible? How is that possible that that instrument is not aligned well, which is like just so unbelievable? And they, what they do? They just throw some numbers like, okay, we have this amount of degree misalignment. It's just
made up numbers.
Yeah, exactly. Just making up numbers, whatever. We'll see what happened. What I want to know is like what happened, why this thing happened to our loved ones. And it happened, and now you're calling them martyr. This is an insult to me. Words have meaning. We cannot just throw them like what in a manner that be like, okay, whatever. They were not going to a fight for God or for a belief. They just come to Iran to visit family for winter break and go back to their work. You killed them. You are responsible. You are in charge.
I want to add to that. I think Iran is trying to minimize this crime to a mistake by an operator. What we want to know is not limited to that operator. We want to know what was the chain of command, who ordered that, who ordered for those missiles to be shot to that plane. We need that. We don't need compensation, or we don't need low-level punishment for some soldiers. We don't need that. In military, chain of command is very important when we take it very seriously. And those people need to come to the International Court of Justice and be responsible for what they did.
I very much appreciate, if the two emotions that you spoke about in the beginning are grief and anger, we've heard that viscerally from both of you through the last half an hour, and I so appreciate you taking the time to do this. I want to end off with a memory of Ghazal, and Ashkan, maybe I'll start with you and then go to Saghar. Maybe in Ashkan, in your case, you can share a fond memory that you have of Ghazal. And go ahead.
Yeah, the memory. I mean, I got to know Ghazal just only 6 years, but it was a very short 6 years. So I want to share with you a memory that I have, the last memory probably that I have with Ghazal in Iran when we were in Iran. It was a morning, and Ghazal, she was just trying to, pick some of the stuff that she had left in Iran. She wanted to bring it back with her to Canada, and she found a camera. It was a camera, one of those that you take a picture and the picture comes out pretty quickly. And
The instant.
Sure.
Yeah,
Polaroid.
Yeah.
Instant camera, or I don't know what they call it, but so she was we are very happy that she found this, because she had it from her childhood. She had good memories, and she said, I'm gonna take it to Canada and I'm gonna have pictures with my friends and things like that. And then we said, okay, how do you know it's still working? And she randomly just took a picture, and I was accidentally in that picture. And I said, since I am in this picture, I want to take this I want to take this one. And she gave it to me, and I still have that picture. And I cannot believe that was the last thing that was given to me by Ghazal. And I still have that picture with me.
Saghar, if you a final word from you, if Ghazal were here today, or if you had the chance to speak to her, what would you want to say?
I just wanted to say that I was wrong, because I told Ghazal that everything gonna be fine and nothing gonna go wrong. I always have this guilty feeling with me that I was not there. Yeah, I was in that same airport like 2 days before, but I was not there at the time that this high tension was happening. I just want to explain to her that I love her so much, and I wish I knew what happened, and I wish I could ask her not to take that plane, not to board, and not to go there. And I wish I could survive her. And I know she knew that how much I love her, but I just want to say sorry that I said everything's gonna be fine.
Saghar Nourian. Yes, Ashkan, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, because this is the feeling that many families have. The sense of guilt. They feel guilty that they let their loved ones board that plane.
Which, of course, is misplaced. You know that you couldn't have anticipated this. You know that no one in the world knew this was going to happen.
Nobody could this. The guilt is for the criminals. The guilt is for the criminals who did this crime, not for the family. So, just wanted to say that.
Saghar, Ashkan, our thoughts are with you. I thank you again for the time. I hope you take care of yourselves. I hope we see you in a post-COVID world before too long. And I once again, we will try to keep the memory alive for forever. And in the meantime, what you've shared with us today, we really appreciate.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Jian. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Bye.
And this is full time for this Roqe Special Edition. Thank you again to all the guests who agreed to come on and discuss very difficult and emotional subject matter. We hope we've been able to create a little more awareness or do our part in keeping the memories of the lives lost last year at this time in the forefront of our minds. Thanks to the amazing team who put this show together. Thank you to all of you out there supporting us and sharing our content. Please subscribe if you've not done so already. You can find me on Instagram at Jian Ghomeshi. Mizun Bashin.
سراب رد پای تو کجای جاده پیدا شد کجا دستاتو گم کردم که پایان من اینجا شد کجای قصه خوابیدی که من تو گریه بیدارم که هر شب حرم دستاتو به آغوشم بدهکارم تو با دلتنگیای من، تو با این جاده همدستی تظاهر کن ازم دوری، تظاهر میکنم هستی. تسکینم صدایی تو جهانم نیست، فقط تصویر میبینم. یه حسی از تو در من هست که میدونم تو رو دارم، واسه برگشتنت هر شب درا رو باز میذارم. سراب رد پای تو کجای جاده پیدا شد، کجا دستاتو گم کردم که پایان من اینجا شد. کجای قصه خوابیدی که من تو گریه بیدارم، که هر شب حرم دستاتو به آغوشم بدهکارم. تو با دلتنگیای من، تو با این جاده همدستی تظاهر کن ازم دوری، تظاهر میکنم هستی.